The energy crisis of the 1970s was one of the catalysts for a period of overall decline in American history. President Carter's handling of the energy and environmental crises was inadequate to the task at hand, and pushed America into the hands of conservatives who would hold on to the White House for the next 12 years. A combination of fear-mongering, disinformation, and regulatory capture would exacerbate the environmental problems facing the country. American foreign policy would be preempted by the military-industrial complex, whose short-sighted profit-seeking would sow the seeds of destruction being reaped by the current generation. Economic policy, guided throughout the 1980s by conservative think tank the Heritage Foundation, trended toward deregulation of industry. This emphasis on corporate freedom would lead to the 2007 subprime mortgage crisis and allow corporations to outsource jobs and profits overseas. The first rumblings of the energy crisis occurred in 1973, when the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries placed an embargo on oil exports to the United States. The embargo was a planned response to U.S. support of Israel after Syria and Egypt launched a surprise assault on the country on October 6th. While the United States only imported 12% of its oil from the Middle East, the embargo nevertheless dealt a powerful blow to the global market. Oil prices skyrocketed, and Americans experienced gas shortages and lines at the pump. President Nixon responded by brokering multilateral peace talks, which eventually led to the cessation of the embargo in March 1974. Alarmed by America's perilous dependence on foreign oil, Nixon's energy policy focused heavily on development of domestic fuel sources, including expanding the nation's nuclear power program. These policies would lead to environmental disasters. Jimmy Carter inherited the energy crisis in 1977. To complicate matters, the country was suffering from a combination of stagnant economic growth and high inflation, called stagflation. In an April 1977 speech, Carter laid out an ambitious energy policy. He spelled out 10 principles that the National Energy Plan would be based on, with a focus on conservation and the development of alternative energy sources. However, energy policy had in turn created another series of crises, beginning with the Love Canal incident in 1978. In a critical failure of government oversight, a school and hundreds of houses had been built on top of over 20,000 tons of toxic waste. Then, in 1979, the 3 Mile Island nuclear generating station in southeast Pennsylvania experienced a partial meltdown. Tens of thousands fled the area, and the nation's faith in nuclear power was shaken. In July 1979, in response to these disasters, Carter delivered a speech in which he described the nation as suffering from a crisis of confidence. He painted a dark picture of American power as faltering and limited, and called on all Americans to support ambitious conservation projects. But subsequent events would lead to an even greater crisis in the confidence the country held for President Carter. In November of 1979, a group of Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American citizens hostage. The hostage-takers demanded the return of exiled dictator Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. They wanted the deposed Shah to stand a trial for the crimes of his secret police. President Carter refused to be blackmailed and ordered the U.S. military to execute a daring rescue, codenamed Operation Eagle Claw. In a humiliating series of events, Eagle Claw was aborted due to helicopter failure, and in the ensuing confusion, a crash took the lives of 8 American servicemen. The hostage crisis would drag on for a total of 444 days, outlasting Carter's presidency and ushering in the era of Ronald Reagan. Reagan took office amidst domestic and international turmoil. The nation's oil supply had once again been threatened, first by the Iranian Revolution of 1979, then by the Iran-Iraq War beginning in 1980. Reagan instituted an economic program that would come to be known as Reaganomics. The main goals of Reaganomics were to cut income and capital gains taxes, reduce government spending, and eliminate government regulation. Reagan managed to accomplish all of these except the reduction in government spending, with the result that the national debt was nearly tripled by the end of his second term in office. On the international stage, Reagan was fiercely anti-communist and pursued a policy of rolling back Soviet influence by providing covert support to anti-Soviet rebels. In his speeches, Reagan described the West's struggle against communism as a battle between good and evil. In a 1983 speech to the National Association of Evangelicals, he called communism a sad, bizarre chapter in human history and referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire. To push the Soviets out of Afghanistan, Reagan provided arms and training to the Mujahideen, Afghan tribal soldiers who were resisting the Soviet occupation. One such soldier was a Saudi expat named Osama bin Laden. The Reagan administration engaged in other rollback activities all around the globe, in Angola, Cambodia, and Nicaragua, in an effort to bleed the Soviet Union's resources by stoking rebellion in its client nations. The Reagan Doctrine, in combination with U.S. support for Israel, itself a product of the Cold War, would ultimately result in the formation of Al-Qaeda and the genesis of modern Islamic terrorism. While conservatives are fond of claiming, erroneously, that terrorists hate us for our freedoms, enemies of the United States can generally point to a specific grievance resulting from U.S. foreign policy decisions. Many of the decisions that led us to the current state of affairs in the Middle East and Europe were products of the Reagan era.